I'm the Life and Legacy Director at the Jewish Federation. It is our pleasure to see all of you here today. So many familiar faces, and to those of you who are new to our Federation from near and far, welcome. We are glad that you're here with us today. Our mission is to strengthen Jewish life and identity in our community, provide for Jewish people in need, and promote support for Israel. During this time of isolation caused by the pandemic, our Federation has turned all our events virtually to continue engaging and connecting with you wherever you are. We are so happy and proud to be able to bring our extended program for all ages and connect with you through music, lectures, films and dance and discussions, classes, cooking, travel, or just pure schmoozing. We have something for everyone. This event is being recorded and you have all been muted to cut down on the background noise, and you will be able to ask questions for Norman when the Q&A starts at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to use your chat function below. Send us a question and we will address them when the presentation is over. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Anat Moskowitz, our moderator for today, and she will introduce you to our guest speaker today, our beloved Norman Weinberg, Dr. Norman Weinberg. Rabbi Moskowitz was ordained in 1999 from the Ziegler School for Rabbinic Studies and has served 2 congregations. She received her BA in psychology from California State University, Long Beach, 2 master's degrees in Hebrew letters and rabbinic studies and California teacher's credential. She's involved in community organizations, including interfaith clergy groups, the Rocky Mountain Rabbinic Council, Jewish Family Services, Hadassah, various advocacy groups supporting children welfare, and the LGBTQ communities. Prior to coming to Sarasota, Rabbi Moskowitz served as the rabbi for the congregation B'nai Torah in Westminster, Colorado for a decade, and as the teacher and rabbi at the Denver Jewish Day School. She and her husband moved to Sarasota in 2019. Rabbi Moskowitz has recently joined the Hershorn Schiff Community Day School faculty, where she will serve as the school rabbi and also guide families, students, teachers on Judaic issues and beyond. Rabbi Anat, take it from here. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Norman Weinberg, you have quite a fan club. It was really fun to hear everybody wishing you well and saying hi to you from all over the country. You are being called a prophet, as you have written a book that preceded what is actually happening in the world. You are actually called a prophet on Amazon. People that are writing comments about your book are awed by the fact that you, in a sense, predicted this pandemic that's happening already when you began writing this book in 2016. Everybody is awed by the way that you bring in your vast knowledge of your experience in chemistry and your experience in Israel. You have an incredible history that has brought this book to life in a really interesting way. So I'm going to go ahead and start with questions of Dr. Norman so that we can flesh out, and you will hear, most of you I think know his history and who he is. But we're going to ask questions. I'm going to ask some questions throughout the book. If you have questions, you can send me private messages through Messenger, through the little message on the chat, and I'll ask the questions as well, or integrate the questions into the questions that I'm asking already. So do we have a split screen so that we can see Norman and myself?
It's not split, it's going to switch back and forth.
It's going to switch back and forth. Okay. So this book is so timely, Doctor. Your message is a powerful clarion call. I actually brought the shofar to light, because I feel like this book is, in a way, almost the way that the shofar sounds us into Rosh Hashanah, an alarm clock, a way to wake up, a clarion call, a call to awareness and action. For those who haven't read it, I don't want to give it all away, but needless to say, it's very relevant for our day and time, and everyone will connect with the pandemic aspect, the virus that you introduce in your novel. So what gave you the idea to use a virus as your calling card for your message?
Thank you, Anat, Rabbi Anat. There is, just want to comment. First of all, I'm not a prophet. I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I ask Hannah, what are we doing today? So it's that simple. Why did I write this book? We've been involved in a number of projects for example, in Poland, restoring the cemeteries. We have been responsible or participated in restoring probably about 35 of the cemeteries. And mass graves. Most of these cemeteries had mass graves. And why did the Holocaust come about? Because there was one crazy Michiganer, Hitler, and it only takes one evil person to bring about massive destruction. So I wanted to write about how civilizations destroy themselves. You know, you may have heard of Enrico Fermi, famous physicist, who asked in the 50s, is there anybody out there? He's asking, are there any alien civilized life forms out there? And the answer came back, many answers came back, but one of the answers was civilizations reach a certain level of sophistication and they self-destruct. And you know, we have this doomsday clock that is shown to us, everyone. A doomsday clock ticking away, and the question is, how close are we to that point? Again, it only takes one event, one person in high place to press that button.
And you introduced the idea of a virus, a pandemic.
Yes.
Like when you first, in the very beginning of the book, it's like, I feel like I'm reading something that was written last week that's actually projecting what is happening in the world right now. But yet you wrote this in 2016. So what was the impotence for the virus part? Like, I understand that the message part, but how that you use the virus as a calling card, so to speak, or as a vehicle to deliver this message.
Yes, the virus bears a message. And part of that message is, are we going to do the right thing or not? This week's Torah portion, you're the rabbi. I think I have used some of the wording in the book. You know, I have set before you life and goodness and death and evil. Choose life so that you will live. And in order to answer this question, I have to go back to something that really caught my imagination, and that is the microorganisms that are around us, in us. You know, we call them the microbiomes. We have a microbiome. We have in our gut at least 10 times more microbes than cells in our bodies. And when you have this gut feeling, there's a gut feeling, they're telling you something. They're actually talking to you through chemical messages. So I wanted to bring in the idea of microbes and the virus in the background, because what are those gut feelings? Those gut feelings could say, should I have that donut or leave it alone? I'm gaining weight. Should I do something good or something evil? Should I steal? Should I give back? Should I donate? Should I hold back? Should I do the right thing? You know, it's almost like you have a piece of God inside you, and I can expand on that. The microbiome, to me, is something like a piece of God, if you like, or a message. It's communicating with you. It's constantly communicating with you. The question is, are you listening? For the scientists of interest amongst you, every cell in our body contains microbial pieces. Viruses helped evolve us, and they're still helping evolve us. So why viruses? Viruses are very important. The viruses outnumber even the bacteria. In our body, they might outnumber 1,000 times in and on our body. So bringing in the idea of a virus sounded logical to me to have that in the background. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, that answers the question beautifully. Thank you. Do you see the current virus of COVID-19 in a sense as a message from beyond, as a message from God, or a message as you introduce the alien concept in your book of an alien culture leaving a message behind for humanity? Do you see COVID as possibly being a message? And if so, what message do you think COVID is leaving for us?
The message is, to me, and I think maybe that we've got to do the right thing always. That we are, as I mentioned, the doomsday clock, we are very close to striking 12. There's so much going on in the world with wars. We have lots of conflicts, violence in our own country. Who knows, the COVID itself, if it continues, could be one of the ways that starts wars again. So yeah, we have good reason to believe that there is a message. I have good reason to believe that there is a message.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll talk about the message a little more. I'm going to ask some more questions around the message. As a rabbi, one of the things that I really loved, I'm a rabbi and I'm also a sci-fi geek. So I literally go to Comic-Con and I go to Starfest. So that's why I was probably asked to do this today, because your book does bring in this alien aspect, this science fiction aspect. It weaves in actual history and human history, and you honor also your history as a chemist, which is incredible and beautiful. But you also bring in Torah. You bring in biblical references. The story is peppered with biblical references. So I guess one of the questions I had as a rabbi is, did you confer with rabbis when you were writing this? What is your rabbinic background, biblical scholars? Or is this just your understanding of the Torah from your experience of living in Israel, or I'm not sure what your education is Judaically. So if you could talk about that for a moment.
We went to Fader, Jewish school. We were influenced in our conservative shul going, also Beth Sholom, by various rabbis. We miss Rabbi Verblo. He was certainly a great influence. The rabbis teach us, and we honor what they say, and we honor what you do, Rabbi Anat.
So why did you choose to use a biblical storyline for an alien storyline? I thought that was really interesting that you overlapped. I mean, most of the alien storylines, like Star Trek, for example, Gene Roddenberry used modern history and what was happening in the world in the 60s when he was writing the original series of Star Trek. But you chose to use biblical characters for this story, which I thought was brilliant. So why did you choose that, or what was your?
First of all, the biblical characters, I even made them sound like our own biblical characters in the science fiction portion of the book. Look, I look at life. Life was created, the scientists believe, about 4 billion years ago, a half a billion years after the Earth cooled, 4 billion years ago. The first life forms were microbes. And microbes made us. I give a presentation, what makes us human? And in the end of that presentation, I say, all of what I have just said, we are mainly microbial. Every cell in our body has the elements of microbial beings. So bringing in the science fiction part, I had in mind that all life has a certain pathway. Life is formed wherever it's formed in the universe, and I believe that we are not alone. Life is everywhere. Life is everywhere. And that life has struggles. If you follow the pathway of life, it has its struggles for survival, to find nourishment, to ward off its enemies, to find secure places to live, propagate. So all life has a certain pathway. Okay, life can be very different wherever it is. It could even have different chemical structure, but there'll be certain kind of pathways that will exist for that life to exist. Bacteria are much different than viruses. Viruses are essentially complex chemical, but each can propagate, and each seeks to propagate in every possible direction. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, that answers, I'm going to ask a little more about that, but yes, thank you. So I've gotten a question, and I have the same question, a question from Rich Bergman about the gut feeling you were talking about.
Okay.
So how do you recognize that gut feeling? How do you know what that gut feeling is telling you?
First of all, a little anatomy. We have some medical doctors, I'm sure, that could explain this better. We have a connection to our brain through the vagus nerve, which stretches right down into our gut. So these microorganisms in our gut send signals. They also produce extremely valuable chemicals that keep us alive. We cannot be alive without them. They send us signals that are chemical. They can be hormones. They can be simple chemicals like butyrate, chemists amongst you. Dopamine and other chemicals that influence our well-being, our emotions, our general health. So yes, the gut is extremely important, and that's part of our microbiome. The guys that are down there, if we didn't have those microbes, we'd be in great trouble. We need them to live.
So
And
instead of turning to heaven for questions and answers, instead of turning to heaven, so to speak, for looking up, I always look up when I have a question or when I'm at wit's end as to what to do with my life. And I hear what you're saying is instead I should turn in and listen to my body and listen to what my gut is telling me to do, because the microbiomes and the symbiotic relationship that we have with bacteria and viruses and whatever are guiding us in our life.
Yes, and going to the parsha where it's set before you life and goodness and death and evil, you have to constantly separate what those feelings are. So you do have a message there, but so there's a connection. Chemical connection to your brain, and there's communication. The word communication is very important. They talk to each other. Every cell in our body talks to each other. It seems. Medical doctors can clarify. Biochemists can clarify. So, what else is going on? In my extension of thinking here, we know there's a microbiome for us, for humans, but it turns out that there's a microbiome for your home. There's a microbiome for your living room. That differs. There's a microbiome for the earth, for the rivers, for the lakes. There's a microbiome that is being studied by scientists for the earth. Is there something special about us? And so I wonder, is there a connection? Is the communication just within us, or is there a communication that's coming from elsewhere too, communicating to us? So if there's microbes around us, above us in the skies, there's a microbiome of the skies. Is there a microbiome? Is there a microbiome of the universe? Right? We don't know these answers to these questions. Where are messages coming from? So you could almost say there's a godlike presence directing us. Is it through microbiomes? Is there an entity that we call God? Is the microbiome of the universe something godlike directing us?
So as young people would say, psh, like mind blown, right? That was mind blowing just to hear you talk about that. The whole idea of
just an idea.
Microbiome for everything, and that there's a specific one for humans and a specific one for the earth and for life in general, and that there is the traditional Jewish belief is that there's a grand, designer, that the creator, God, created all of this. You bring in this idea of, another alien life form that sends these messages. There's a question here about the Iconians that are the alien life form you describe in your book. You describe them as almost angelic, and yet they succumb to violence and destruction. Is this supposed to be a warning that even a being closer to purity can undo itself? So in a sense, this is for those of you that haven't read the book yet, it's giving a little bit away of this alien planet that basically sends a warning to Earth through this virus, but they are, the way you describe them in the beginning is that they're almost, perfection, they're angelic, and yet they too destroy themselves. So I guess the question that Sam Weinberg is asking is even being angelic and being closer to purity a bad thing, of something that can also lead to violence and destruction? Or maybe put it another way, what can we do to avoid that? What can we do as humans to avoid violence and destruction? What is your message that you encoded in this alien life form sending to humanity?
Yes. So, Sam, hi, Sam. I think good and evil, again, extending, is everywhere. Choose good over evil. So in the science fiction portion of the book, amongst the Iconians and Draconians, they have their war. They're, without giving away too much of the book, they decide it's paramount that we don't kill each other, that we obey a commandment, don't kill. Fifth commandment in our commandment of the 10. Do not kill. Sometimes interpreted in other ways, don't murder. But I chose do not kill. Because not only is that a warning, and that's what is sent out through a microorganism at the Iconians everywhere. That message has a positive and a negative. It's again coming back to you have a choice: life and goodness, or death and evil. And that is the message of Red, of the Iconians, because they themselves have understood that civilizations destroy themselves.
Seems to be a history that gets repeated over and over again, where we know in our human history that civilizations, the great Roman Empire, that these huge civilizations, destroy themselves. And, we're all thinking the same thing on some level. What is humanity going to do next? And are we in that space and time? And I think you're saying that, you're heeding a warning, you're giving us a warning that we're in what we would have called, or what I always hear Fiddler on the Roof and Tevye, calling out to Mashiach, now would be a good time for Mashiach to come. This must be the end of days, and Mashiach should be coming soon. I believe we have to do the work to bring about Mashiach. I believe we have to change the world and create a messianic age and create a world of beauty and purity and peace before the Messiah, Mashiach, will come. But you talk about it, differently, that this message is already here, in a sense, that the message has already come to earth, and we have to listen to this message, or we're going to end times. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Very good interpretation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, but I wanted to make sure. It's like, all right, so now I'm like, as I'm sitting here, I'm listening to my stomach and what my stomach is saying, other than it's almost lunchtime. I'm trying to listen to the idea of my gut and what my gut is saying. All right, so just to add also, although it's technically, I think the book is in a science fiction genre, if you look up, if you're trying to find the book, but you also, there's a lot of science, specific science that backs up the storyline. So for those of you those people that don't know you, if you can talk a little bit about your training and education and work and knowledge in science and chemistry at the Technion, I think you said the Technion in Israel, If you could talk a little bit about that and how that, you know, preempted and kind of was the preface for your storyline.
Yeah. Starting back when I was very young, a child, we were very poor, didn't have toys, and any piece of junk would do. And in those days, kids would go to the library. I went to the library and I read voraciously. What really got to me was science. About 10 years old, I remember taking out the boy's book of photography. And I built myself a pinhole camera out of pieces of cardboard as directed in the book, with a shutter that you moved. But then I had to have something that was going to be light sensitive. So I needed, call it a formula. And I remember going to the local druggist and the drugstore, and I said, look, I have 25 cents in the pocket. Can you sell me these chemicals, right? What are you going to use them for? I want to make light sensitive materials so I can take pictures. Okay, so he helped me in the first round, and I actually coated some paper, stuck it in the back of this camera that I had made, and made some pictures. You had to expose for about a half an hour, and then you dissolved dissolved out the image in salt water, and it was a miracle to me. That to me was the first experiment, and I began liking science more and more. So through high school, science was a favorite. I also studied, I remember, 5 languages in high school. You don't do that. Greek and Latin and French and German and of course English. And when the guidance counselor came to me, my turn, he said, I think you ought to go into languages in university. Maybe Sanskrit would be good for you. No, I'm interested in science. And so I enrolled in University of Toronto, as did Hannah following me, my wife Hannah. And studied maths, physics, and chemistry. And went on to the University of Ottawa for my PhD, and did electrochemistry there. Did a postdoc in Israel at the Technion. Got immersed in Judaism in a different way that I had ever known. Really proud of being a Jew and proud of being in Israel at that time in the 60s. And it had a great influence on me. So you'll see parts in the book.
Yes.
Deal with Israel.
Yes.
That's where it came out. Science, look, after Israel, I got a job with Bristol Myers, making new drugs. I remember making a drug that called Activol. It would work on everything. Unfortunately, when they tested it on mice, it killed all the mice. Later, I got a job at American Cyanamid, and I was part of a team that developed the very first lithium battery. Everybody's got lithium batteries these days in their iPhones and everywhere else. I was in the group that was involved in lithium batteries. So electrochemistry became part of our my interest. And with Hannah, we built a business, the electrosynthesis company, which was quite successful, got bought out. We did a lot of research there for many companies involved in universities, had great connections with Israeli companies as well. And, yeah, science was very much part of me all the way.
Yeah.
And Hannah was a part of this journey all along, and she still is.
You're a lucky guy. You're a lucky guy to have a good partner in life and such support. So your science knowledge and experience definitely comes through in the book, and it's very much appreciated. You never know when you pick up a sci-fi book if it's going to be valid and if it's actually going to be backed up. And for those of you that haven't read it yet, this book has valid science in it. It's really quite brilliant. It's amazing. So I'm getting some questions, Doctor, about your work on the red tide. Red tide's been a problem here, and your tie to the science in Commandment in the book.
Yes. So I got interested in red tide attending a lecture by became my good friend, Lenny Landau of Sarasota. Lenny, an engineer, worked out really quite a detailed, complex set of conditions and results that explain the red tide. And I was really very interested in what he put together, and we got together, and I got very interested in seeing if I could do something about it. And so in our home in Sarasota, we have a cabana separate. I bought myself a pretty good microscope, set up a little basic laboratory, and tested a number of ways to destroy algae, red tide. Again, you know, this is also a microorganism.
Yes.
Algae are microorganisms. For whatever reason, they put out a toxic chemical that people get sick from. It can cause all kinds of problems. Algae that, well, without algae, you wouldn't have oxygen in the air to breathe. That's how important they are to us. Microorganisms keep us alive, I have said.
Yes.
Algae contribute to a great percentage of the oxygen that we breathe.
Excellent. And you can tell how that ties into your book, because it's a reoccurring theme in the book of microorganisms and the biome and everything that holds a message, which we could have this conversation for days about life, and even the idea, I remember as a child being concerned about killing a virus. I remember when I had a virus and I was old enough to understand when the doctor said, we're trying to kill the virus, and I got upset by that because I knew that a virus was a living thing. And so there's a deeper conversation to have about what we're doing to our environment and the planet and the things that we're killing that are actually, in a sense, trying to save us. And that's definitely addressed in your book. There's been some questions also about a sequel to this book. So apparently some people have read it and are waiting for part 2 or the sequel to this book. So if you could talk about your plans for that, that would be great.
Yes, I'm struggling with the sequel, and I may do that, but right now I'm after another book.
Oh.
A more scientific book, and tentatively titling it Microbiotics.
Oh.
Microbiotics. Not only do we have to look at the larger aspect of life, we have to look at the most minutest part of life. If you want to have a healthy gut, for example, just a healthy example of what I mean, you want to have a healthy gut microbiome, you have to look after it. You have to feed it. And one of the best foods for feeding your microbiome is going to be fiber. Foods containing fiber. No animal food has fiber in it unless you eat the gut of the cow or vegetarian animal that has consumed fiber. So the meat, dairy, there's no fiber. You have to have vegetables in your diet to maintain a healthy gut. If you don't maintain a healthy gut, you can wind up with diseases. You know, Hippocrates, 2,500 years ago, made a statement, of course, the Hippocratic oath that doctors take. But he also made a statement about health. The statement was, all diseases start in the gut. And he didn't know about microbes. I don't think so. 2,500 years ago, they wouldn't have seen a microbe until the microscope was invented. Anton Leeuwenhoek, the microscope. But here was really a prophet, Hippocrates, saying all disease begin in the gut. So what you eat is very important. So microbiotics is my next book, I think. I have been gathering information.
Yeah, that'll be definitely a big help for us to read that. And now that we're hooked on your writing and hooked on your experience and your education and everything else, I'm excited to see what you come up with next. There's been some questions about where to buy the book. I got it on Amazon. I assume you can get it from any bookseller, from Barnes & Noble or whoever is.
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'll tell you what's happening.
Okay.
It was actually easy to get the book out, thanks to Carolee Hemis, artist for the book. She was much more than artist. She has been a very close friend, colleague. She did the artwork, but beyond the artwork, she was also reviewed the book carefully, made wonderful suggestions, and she has helped me along the way, helped me get this on Amazon, and for others, if you want to get it on Kindle, you can get it on Kindle. But we are now talking to Archway, which is associated with Simon & Schuster. They've become interested in the book. They will publish it, and that would go out to, let's say, the Barnes & Noble, the booksellers, and so on. Yeah, it's in motion right now. Then I have a very good friend, Catherine Gorsuch, who's looking into finding a playwright. She put together a play with the help of a master's degree student about the Holocaust. Actually, the student interviewed about a dozen survivors and put together a wonderful play that could be enacted in high schools, for example, where students would take on the persona of the survivor. I don't know if there's a better way to teach Holocaust than students actually becoming, in their own sense, the survivor.
Excellent.
Right.
Looking forward to that, to all the after effects of this book. If you haven't read it, like I said, it's available on Amazon at this point and is coming out in all sorts of different forms soon. If you have questions about what makes us human and this idea of God through microorganisms and messages and a way to connect to what's happening in the world. And I'll disagree with you on one thing, Doctor. I think you are a prophet. You have brought forth a message, and the prophets of our tradition always had a message and a warning to humanity about destruction by not following the commandments. And so you do give that warning, and you give it in a very beautiful and intellectual way. And it was an honor to read this book, and it was an honor to meet you and to interview you. And we're going to wrap it up. The only other question I have here is, will it come out on Audible so people can listen to the book? I assume that will happen at some point.
Yes, we need a couple volunteers who are willing to do that for us.
Okay.
We also need a female voices that will sing the Jewish songs that are in that book.
Well, we have female cantors that I'm sure will be happy to do that for you. So thank you again. This has been amazing. I'm going to turn it back to Giselle.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful presentation. Rabbi Anat, thank you again for participating in another of our events. Norman and Hannah, thank you for your love, for all you do in all communities. We appreciate you. We love you. I hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in many other events that our Federation offers, please visit our website at jfed.org, jfedsrq.org, /events, and hope to see you again soon.
But I just want to make a comment, Giselle. Yeah. I want to thank the Federation. Thank you for your team. Obviously, help put this together. Even the Federation in Buffalo have been connected in too. And I want to thank them, Rob Goldberg and Ellen Goldstein. But I also want to thank the audience for listening to all of this, whether you agree or not agree with things that I have said. And I want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, safe New Year.
Same to you and your families. Thank you, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.